Hi, Brian. Hi, this is William Beck. How are you?
I am good.
Great, great. Well, glad we finally got a chance to talk.
So, you've done a lot of research about the HAARP program?
I have. I've written a novel about the HAARP project, and found it to be quite fascinating. And, I think there's a lot more to it than most of the public realizes.
So, from your perspective, what is HAARP and what do you think it does?
Well, if you look at the official version, it's a huge antenna array system located in Gakona, Alaska, and it's a joint military venture between the United States Air Force and U.S. Navy and the University of Alaska. And supposedly they are using this by sending up huge electromagnetic energy waves into the ionosphere and purportedly using this for communications on extra low frequencies so they can communicate with submarines and things such as that. However, it remains quite an enigma. One of the best ways to disguise something is throw it right out in people's faces and then not really talk about it. And, it's been a few years since my first novel, HAARP's Fury, came out, and but I've continued to look at things and research things since that time. And, I have to say that, obviously I can't prove it, but, if we could press an advantage militarily over our folks that we have issues with in the world today, why would we not be doing that? And so if you look at the things that are written about the HAARP and the potentials that it may have, it's a very interesting and frightening proposition. Anything from weather modification, causing earthquakes, mind control are the big ones. But if you go back and research this back into the 80s when a fellow named Bernard Eastland received his patents for this and go through those patents, it's like, wow, it's an eye-opener. And, so are they doing something weather-wise? Are they creating earthquakes for military purposes? I would say why not? And, it's like anything else. We don't know exactly what goes on. We're not privy to that information because it's kept behind locked doors. But certainly I think the real potential is there for some of this stuff at least, and at least in the beginning stages, if not more advanced. And, if you look at, I targeted weather in my book. And if you look at the weather issues that have gone on, it is fascinating. Some people say it's cyclical, some say it's just nature, but sometimes you wonder exactly what is going on with issues such as that at the moment. And, it does give one cause to just stop and think and say, is somebody or can somebody do this? This technology is supposedly based on Nikola Tesla's things that he invented and that the government bought up as patents in the early 40s. And so it makes for a very interesting proposition. There's all kinds of things out there going on with this. We've had weather modification bills that passed the House and Senate that seem quite innocuous upon first inspection. If you sit there and read through them, and I don't know if you've had the opportunity to do those or not with those bills, but they certainly leave you questioning what did these people really have in mind. And that the bills I'm referring to are Senate Bill number 517 of the 109th Congress, which was in March of 2005, and introduced by Kay Bailey Hutchinson from Texas. And interestingly, the the byline to start this off with, to establish weather modification operations and research board and for other purposes. That, when I read that, I shuddered. It's like, what do you have in mind for other purposes? And what do you have in mind that you're doing with this controversial project that's going on up there in Alaska?
That's a very interesting input. What do you think about the fact that some of the HAARP magnetometer records that are available to the public have disappeared?
Well, I just, as a matter of fact, last week ran across that one, and I find that very interesting because why would they suddenly disappear, out from everyone's noses? Is it something that they don't want to know or people to know what is going on? And, so when you see things like that, it can't do anything but raise eyebrows and suspicion, because it's like there's no reason for this stuff to disappear and all of a sudden it's gone. I don't know if you saw the information about the earthquake that recently happened in Japan, but, and I'm trying to find that link here on my computer at the moment, but it was showing that, when there is an earthquake, the earth resonates at a certain frequency. And apparently the HAARP was on at that time and had been for several days and was tuned exactly into that frequency. Now, the question becomes, it's like, well, why would we target Japan? That makes no sense. And that one I don't have an answer for. If this indeed was going on, if this indeed was intentional, unless for some reason there was some type of mishap and it really wasn't supposed to target Japan, maybe possibly somewhere else. Who knows, North Korea is in that area. But gosh, you look at that information and it's really frightening.
Let's see. Last month there were 2 record-breaking tornadoes all over, I guess it was in the southeast to the northeast of America. Do you believe that they are in any way connected with HAARP or ESCAT?
Well, again, you're asking me something that, the answer is theoretical, because obviously I can't prove anything. But what I will say is this, is that it's interesting to look at weather patterns since the advent of the project itself in 2002, and see the things that have gone on. I spoke with Jim Cantori of the Weather Channel that is on TV after the book first came out. He read my book, and he called me up, and we talked about possibly doing some programs on the Weather Channel that never came to fruition, unfortunately. But he was fascinated by the possibilities of this, and his quote to me was, is somebody really doing this? And this is a guy who is a professional meteorologist, and he's questioning, do we have the ability to do this? And if we do, why? And what are the ramifications of something like that happening? We start taking the ionosphere and changing the plasma mix up there and the ion concentration. Who knows what the long-term effects of those type of things are? And certainly, I don't think anybody really does know. And I think that time will tell if we are indeed doing this. But it sure is suspicious, let's just put it that way. Here, where I live in the South, just this past week, we had all these terrible storms. These poor, unfortunate folks that their homes been devastated and lives lost. And I was watching the weather during the storm as they were giving updates, and they were talking about one particular spot. They had 3,000 lightning strikes in a very small area within a 10-minute period. Commented on the amount of tornadoes that we have had this year, which has gone beyond anything on record. And so it's like, have we unleashed a monster here? And like I said, I can't prove anything, but I certainly have my suspicions that, yes, we may have done some damage in the ionosphere, and who knows what goes on. Now, the other side of that coin is that, is somebody doing that to us? In 2003, there was an article in Pravda, a Russian newspaper, decrying the fact that, the U.S. should not be involved in the HAARP project, and neither should Russia. And I found that quite an interesting proposition, that these folks were talking about that over there, and that they had some knowledge of that. So, it's not just something here in this country. China also supposedly has been working on some type of technology to affect weather changes. And I know we have the traditional things of cloud seeding and all these other issues like that, but this certainly goes well beyond the capabilities of those type of things.
That's great. You're doing great. So what is your expertise in? Like what are you an expert on?
Well, my education background is that I am a registered nurse. So I'm not a physicist or have any type of science background other than the sciences, for nursing. However, having written a series of novels that deal with somewhat of a conspiratorial twist, there is lots of research that, at least for me, is involved in these books, because I try to not only provide the reader an excellent read, but also try and keep it as honest and as real and as factual with the information that I can find that's out there when I'm writing these books. And there's certainly plenty of information out there about the HAARP project, and just seems to be more and more as time goes on. Interestingly, this is something I just ran across recently. Over in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai, they have created their own HAARP project. Since it's an arid country, a desert basically, they get very little rain, and of course they have an incredible amount of wealth in that country. And this was an internet news article stating to the fact that they have been able to create their own storms to provide water by using a HAARP-type project. And I was just blown away by that. Here we now have some proof that this indeed is not only possible, but it is going on at the moment. And that was under naturalnews.com. And the headline is, "Weather Control is No Myth. Scientists Engineered Thunderstorms Over Dubai." And this was on January 13th of 2011 this year. And actually had spoken with a patient recently who had been in Dubai, and he, I started just casually talking to him, and we got on the fact of weather and this type of thing. And he said, well, interestingly, there has been a number of rainstorms over there before I came back. I said, well, that just sort of confirms things. And so is it possible to do this? It sure sounds like it. And I think also since Bernard Eastlund received his patents back in the 80s, that we now have 20 to 30 years of new technologies and abilities, and in working with this, that the possibility of this going on is certainly well on the plus side.
So I mean, even though you're not a scientist, you seem to be, you seem to know a lot about this. As like you're getting into the middle of all this.
Well, like I said, I've done lots of research for my writing, and continue to keep an eye on it because I do feel it's important, and I do speak with people about it when those situations come up, because I think it's something that citizenry of this country does need to know. Also, the potential of good things happening from this are great. The potential for bad things happening from this are great also. And it's a scary proposition. This falling into the hands of not the right people, is not a good thing. I mean, you stop and think about it. Let's take last year exactly at this time in Nashville, Tennessee. They were inundated over a period of 2 to 3 days with horrific rains and just phenomenal amount of flooding. It was just devastating. And so if you put that in perspective, okay, this has happened over a period of 3 days because this weather system stalled out. You multiply that by 2 or 3 weeks in an area of a country. Think of what you could do. I mean, if it's a military venture, I mean, you basically shut down that country's military. They're not operating. And so, from that sense, it makes the perfect weapon. There's no shell casings to prove who it came from. There's no fallout from radiation. We've flooded you out. We've dumped snow on you, or whatever, cyclones, hurricanes, those type of things. And so it could indeed become the ultimate weapon, or certainly a weapon of mass destruction.
All right, I've only got one more question left.
Mm-hmm.
There was a quote by the United States Secretary of Defense William S. Cohen, April of 1997. He said, "Others are engaging even in the eco-type of terrorism, whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes, remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. What do you think of it?"
Well, if we go back and review the beginnings of HAARP up until today, there's been lots of talks that earthquakes in Iran were caused by the HAARP. And I certainly feel that that's a strong possibility. The potential for this and people skirting around it in government positions, other countries alluding to it in papers, has to beg the question, does this really exist? And, typically where there's smoke, there's fire. So do I think this is going on? Yeah, I have my beliefs. I think that there's something going on. How far advanced it is, that I don't know. But I certainly would say that, technology has advanced to the point where if you look at normal military things, we didn't know anything about stealth airplanes back in the early 80s, late 70s when they were working on them, and then they were released in the early 90s in the first Gulf War. And that just surprised everybody, but they've been working on them for 20 years. So who knows at what point, the technology is at the moment and how this all happens. But, when it should be very worrisome for people when officials talk in the capacity that this man did, and either he's talking completely out of line or he has an inside straight onto what's going on, or at least part of it. And people should be very leery and very wary of that, just because of all the potential issues that this project raises.
All right. Thanks, William.
Well, you're welcome. And, if people want any more information, they can certainly go to my website, www.booksbybeck.com. Find out about the books, because I think one effective way of reaching people is present something in a way that's pleasant to read rather than just, constantly bombarding them with, positive or negative things on either side of the fence. And so and there's certainly links on my website to the project and other research projects for other books that I've written.